As an Australian, what I'm proudest of and what I treasure most is our success as a multicultural nation. We are the most successful multicultural country in the world, but our success is under threat from those who would divide us. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, not only around the world, but here in Australia, and it is the most serious threat to our social cohesion that we face. Because we know that anti-Semitism doesn't just affect Jewish Australians, it is a harbinger of broader hate and prejudice. That is why this bill is so important. It will ban some of the most egregious and hateful symbols of anti-Semitism, including the Nazi salute and the trade and glorification of Nazi paraphernalia, as well as banning examples of proscribed terrorist organisations. And it bears witness to our determination to support our Jewish community and our multicultural success. I support this bill with all my heart, because for my community, the rise of anti-Semitism is an existential threat. This bill sends a clear and unequivocal message. Anti-Semitism will not be tolerated in this country. Not now, not ever. But in itself, it is not enough. The electorate of Wentworth has the country's highest proportion of Jewish Australians, and my community is scared. The horrific attacks by Hamas on October 7 have not only created a war in Israel and Gaza, they are causing an unprecedented rise in anti-Semitism in our community. Australia has been a safe haven for many people from around the world, a chance for many, like my own mum, to come to a new country, to bring up their family safely, to work hard and build a prosperous life for their family. And Australia has been a particularly safe haven for the Jewish people. And they have paid that back in the contribution they have made to the broader Australian society. But tragically, it is starting to feel like this is changing. In the words of one of my friends, Australia is scary, which is awful, as it's possibly one of the best places on earth to be Jewish. Anti-Semitism in Australia isn't new. Even in the last year and a half since I've been a Member of Parliament, I've been dealing with a number of anti-Semitic incidences in my community. In one of the most egregious examples, a young boy from one of our local schools was locked in a locker as a simulation of being in a gas chamber. Anti-Semitism in our universities has been on the rise, and it is heartbreaking to learn that almost two-thirds of Jewish students, now this is before October 7, two-thirds of Jewish students in our universities report anti-Semitic incidences, and around half say that sometimes they've hidden their Jewish identity on campus. But since October 7, anti-Semitism has become so much worse, with a five-fold increase in the number of incidences compared with previous times. In my community alone, in Wentworth, we've seen posters of Hitler, graffiti on Jewish homes, businesses, including Kill Jews and Jews Live Here. We have seen acres of anti-Semitic content on social media. We've seen imams preaching hate and a provocative motorcycle convoy travelling in our community to intimidate Jewish Australians. Some are even calling for the boycott of Jewish or Zionist businesses, simply because they support the existence of a Jewish state in Israel. I find this appalling. Many of these businesses were created by first or second generation Holocaust survivors who came to Australia to create a better life. These businesses have contributed to our country. They have provided employment across the board to many different Australians. And do the people calling for that boycott not realise one of the first anti-Semitic acts of the Nazis was to boycott Jewish businesses? Just 2 days after the 1,200 Israelis were brutally murdered by Hamas and over 240 were taken hostage, we saw hateful anti-Semitic chants at the Opera House, our iconic Australian icon. My community still can't believe that happened in Australia and is extremely troubled that no one has yet been brought to justice for this. Mostly these anti-Semitic incidences have been intimidation rather than physical violence, though what happened in Caulfield was a terrible example of the physical violence. But ASIO is telling us that they monitor known threats of violence, but they are concerned about unexpected lone wolf attacks. So our schools, our synagogues in my area, who already have guards, who already have checks to go in if you would like to worship or would you like to drop off your kids, have significantly increased their security since the attack, including parents volunteering for security duty. I drive past those schools with those guards, those synagogues, almost every day when I'm back in Wentworth. It is very hard to believe that this happens in Sydney, which is one of the safest places on earth. The members of my Jewish community are scared. They feel isolated. The impact is real. To give you some examples, on referendum day, on the day the voice was voted, I was going around the polling booths and I noticed that I met one of my volunteers and I said, "Oh, where's your wife?" Because I knew she was a passionate supporter of the voice. And when I asked her husband, he said, "Oh, there was some anti-Semitic graffiti outside their house and it made her too scared to go out." Another woman came to see me the other week. She was born in Australia, the daughter of a Holocaust survivor on one side, and a long-time Jewish Australian family on the other who'd been hit for more than 100 years. After seeing the anti-Semitic chants at the Opera House, her 12-year-old son asked her if they were still safe here. She talked to me about how she identifies as a progressive person, someone who cares a lot about environmental issues, but she does not feel safe or welcome in the environmental sector anymore. A man told me he received a text from an old university friend. It was the first time he'd heard from her for years, but the message was blunt. "What you are doing in Gaza is appalling." As if he was responsible for every action of the Israeli government, as if Hamas had never attacked. Some of the anti-Semitism we're seeing is particularly chilling because of the history of anti-Semitism in the world. The Jewish Holocaust survivors in my electorate and their families remember when they were accepted members of the Jewish community or other European communities. They attended schools, they worshipped as they wish, they ran businesses, they even fought alongside their nation in World War I. They remember how things changed step by step as anti-Semitism festered and grew unopposed until it overwhelmed them and saw 2/3 of European Jews murdered in the Holocaust. That the symbols of the Nazi regime could re-emerge and be celebrated 90 years on is devastating for them. I'm also concerned that we are seeing an increase in hostility to Israel. It's not necessarily anti-Semitic. We can all disagree with Israelis' politics, but it risks this hostility that is emerging, risks increasing anti-Semitism, or at least really isolating the Jewish community in Australia. In a diverse country, we will inevitably see different views on conflicts overseas, including in Israel and Gaza. But what does it say to a Jewish student when the Teacher Federation promotes teachers wearing a keffiyeh into the classroom to express their political views? Where is the teacher's care for those Jewish students? I support people's right to protest. I support people's right to wear their cultural or religious dress. But I am really concerned about teachers using their position in our schools as political platforms. This Parliament and parliaments across the country must lead by example. Our first duty is the safety of our community. To this end, I have been a constant advocate for community security grants to ensure that our communities have the security infrastructure that sadly they need today, because I know they need it. I have seen it for my own eyes in my community. And I support and I respect and thank the government for the recent investment that they have made since the attacks on October 7. We must also ensure that the laws and their enforcement are appropriate to protect people from vilification and violence. I support the New South Wales Government work to improve the prosecution process for the offences of publicly threatening or inciting violence against a person or group based on race and religion. There is no place for that in this country, and we must ensure that people who do that are suitably prosecuted. Our children are our future, and we need to protect them and ensure they feel safe and welcome in all education environments, and that we are teaching tolerance into our children from the beginning. We need to adapt our curriculum for those challenges today. We cannot let the horrific events of the Holocaust slip beyond memory as the survivors passed. Educators on the pernicious history of anti-Semitism must be ensured, and I support the work of the ECAJ on this and will be championing it. My personal focus is particularly on universities. I was devastated to talk to young Jewish students who told me about their experience of anti-Semitism in universities, and this is all before October 7. So I'm very proud to be working with Julian, Lisa and Josh Burns as co-chairs of the Parliamentary Friends of International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. We are working to encourage universities to adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, to raise awareness of anti-Semitism on campus amongst our university leaders, and to improve the reporting and management of complaints around anti-Semitism. Through our advocacy over the last year, 5 universities have already adopted the definition, and we have received support from the Education Minister to present to the Working Group on University Governance specifically about anti-Semitism, so that the specific governance that we think is required in the university system to support the stamping out of anti-Semitism on universities is achieved. That is our goal. There is more work to be done on all areas, but I want to reassure the community that they are not alone in their work to stamp out anti-Semitism across this country. To return to the bill, anti-Semitism takes many forms. This bill addresses some of the most egregious and horrific, the hate symbols and actions that celebrate the barbaric Nazi regime. Banning these symbols won't address all forms of anti-Semitism, but it draws a clear line, and that's important. It makes clear to Jewish Australians that all Australians recognise that bigotry, racism, hate speech and hate symbols are beyond the bounds of what we accept. Many in my community are Jewish, but this is not just an issue for Jewish Australians who suffer the direct affront of anti-Semitism. This is an issue of great concern for our whole community, because all Australians are diminished whenever anti-Semitism is allowed to fester and grow. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond anti-Semitism, and it goes to the heart of our social cohesion and our multicultural strength. Anti-Semitism diminishes all Australians and creates a space for other hate and prejudice to thrive. From history, we do know that if the Jews are persecuted, other minorities are not safe. Anti-Semitism is the harbinger of further hate and prejudice, and we must stamp it out. I have listened to my community, and I know how deeply they support this legislation. I support this law with all my heart, just